Are you looking for a way to structure your streams in terms of live streaming to YouTube, X, whatever it may be, and focus on a system that converts but also brings value? Well, this video is actually just for you. I actually did a lot of research. I spent a couple hours looking into some of the top live streamers, specifically in Rumble to YouTube to even X, and this is the system that we're using going forward that I think is very solid. And I put this in the AI as well, Grok specifically, and it came out with a system of this sort that is absolutely solid. I presented to my agency team and they absolutely loved it. I think it's going to be actually crush. And so I wanted to make this video because they're absolutely stunned with the amount of work that I kind of put into this. And I just kind of wanted to share it for free. So if you give me the next about like 10 to 15 minutes, I'm going to outline everything you need to know in terms of your questions you may have of, okay, how do I structure this? Okay, how long should it be? Okay, where can I maybe plug in some of my stuff? Like, for example, you might have a membership. That's what we're doing. We have a membership that we're selling. You might have a course. Maybe you might have specifically a consultation. This can work for any offer you have, whether it's ecom to just a membership. It all works. So give me the next 10 to 15 minutes. I'll give you everything. And if you have any questions past that point, then feel free to comment below. So let's get right into it. So I put this really in mind of, okay, how can we maximize as much as possible of getting people in and bringing in new people into our audience that maybe might not know who we are. And so the way I looked about it is, okay, after looking at people like Alex Jones, if you don't know who he is, he's a big streamer on Rumble and X. I looked at people like Altcoin Daily, how they structure the videos. I looked at a person like John Claude. If you don't know who he is, again, these are names that are kind of more in our sphere and who the type of people we're talking to. But I also looked at other live streamers, traders, specifically even CNBC and other even live shows. Now, this is slightly geared towards a little bit more business oriented. So take in mind with that, take this as a big kind of grain of salt here, but let's get right into it. So first, you want to start off with your hook. Now the hook, very obvious. You want to kind of, when you first start your stream, you want to let the people know what they're going to get. So their filter in their mind is able to say, hey, this is for me. Hey, it's not for me. I'm going to go and click off. And that's not a bad thing. The truth is, if you have people who are coming on your stream and let's just say they're into gaming and you're speaking business and they have no interest in business, whoever somehow they got on your live stream, whatever it may be, does not matter. Let's just assume someone's on there that are not your custom target audience. The purpose of this hook is to tell, hey, this is for you. If you're my target audience, it's probably going to apply to you. So what you do is you first have, and it's not limited to this, you can kind of modify it to what you have and what you want to do. But what I suggested specifically was, first you have your main story. So you got your main story, which is A. We'll say topic A. You see A, B, C here. So the first thing is topic A. Topic A is going to be your main kind of news story you want to talk about. So let's just say there's some news out in the landscape or the ecospace. It's super big. Maybe it's like the Clarity Act in crypto. Maybe there's some new trading thing that's out there that's new. That's amazing. Maybe there's a new tool you want to kind of showcase that's amazing. Whatever it may be, this is your main story. And so this is going to be your main hook. But you also have two others. And you can actually stack this as how many you want. But you want to be careful of not doing too many. So now you also have an additional B and C story. You can line these up or you don't have to. It's all optional. So you can have an A story and that'd be it. You have a B, you have a C. And so the purpose of A is being your main story, then you have B as a side story, and C as an addition story. When you watch a lot of these other live streamers, they have consistent different stories to touch on. And the reason they do this is specifically because it's different hooks. What do I mean by this? Well, A, let's just say A just doesn't hook or grab someone's attention, right? No worries. Then we got B and C. Okay, B doesn't grab attention. Oh man, okay. Well, we got C lined up. Oh man, so C, no one, maybe you're not interested, the person's not interested in C. Well, that's probably a problem. Either they're not in your target audience or they are, but maybe this topic's not talking to them. And that's completely fine. Not every topic is going to be meant for that person. When you have an overarching ICP, ideal client profile, the person you're talking to, some topics are maybe going to resonate with them, and some topics are not. That's going to be in that space. Someone who's a beginner may not be interested in something more maybe more advanced that you're touching on. That's completely fine, and maybe that's what the whole stream is on. And I want to be clear, your whole live stream should touch on one major theme. What do I mean by this? Well, we're doing a live stream, and for crypto specifically for this case, and let's just say there's a new news report on tokenization. So we're going to dedicate this live stream to generally tokenization. So that's going to be our main story here in A. A is going to be a main story is tokenization. The New York Stock Exchange, or the New York NYSE, has now tokenized and is going 24/7. Great. That means that's going to be our main topic. Now B and C could be supplemental topics. These are topics that can work on, or you can kind of mention, you can slide in, it can add additionally. Does it have to be the same exact thing as A? No. But you like to have a coherent kind of idea. When you look at like someone like Patrick Bet-David, when they have interviews, it's kind of the same thing. The interview you can kind of treat as a live stream if you want. Just some ideas I'm throwing up there. So let's just say none of this actually speaks to these people. That's completely fine. We also have then our Q&A or interview section, which is another great hook to get people in. Let's just say you have an expert lined up for this interview that knows this topic like the back of the hand, and you want to bring them on and it's tapping into a new audience that you can tap into that you don't have access to, but you're also providing value to your viewers. That's amazing, right? And so we want to utilize that, and so we want to tee that up to say, hey, by the way, as well, we're talking about these stories, but you might be interested in actually seeing our interview with XYZ, insert name, and then you like instill the credibility, who's from X company, who's done over 100K or 100 million and whatever. Like you just set them up. You just set them up and make it really sound really interesting, and kind of outline what you're going to talk about. So you say like XYZ is from this company. We're going to touch on exactly why this is important, why you should get into this thing, in the secrets that nobody's telling you about that they're going to spill on this live stream, which usually costs, but we're getting to you completely free. See, we're building that up. Amazing, right? Now, let's just say you don't have someone. Completely fine. That's where you do a Q&A section. And so I want to kind of like make this aware and make this point as well, that this Q&A specifically, that's going to be spread out throughout this whole thing. You don't want to keep your live stream as a formal, like, hey, I'm going to be talking about this topic, and then all the way at the end, I'm going to answer some of your questions. No, you want to answer them throughout, especially if you want to keep it more of like a conversation flow. That's the way it should work. Now, this is different. I want to be clear. This is completely different from like a webinar. A webinar is more of a formal presentation, and so there's that. Those are a little more formal, but I think this process is very solid if you're doing more live stream, kind of one-on-one or kind of one-to-many, if you will. That's a good book, but one-to-many in this case. So there's that. So we got the hook out of the way. I've tried to be a little bit faster, but I want to make sure you get all this kind of this wisdom, this kind of nuggets and such. So that could be like maybe like 3 to 5 minutes, if you will. Shouldn't be taking that long, but should be instantly to hook them in and be like, hey, and make sure you wait like a minute or two for people to kind of flood in over time. But you hook them in, tell them what they need to know, and then you're good and solid. Then at this point, then we got an early pitch. So now you hooked them in, very similar to like a video. You hook them in, and now you introduce your sponsor. Now you introduce what you want to say. And usually language like this is pretty simple. You just segue it by saying like, by the way, before we get into this, see what I did there? By the way, it's natural language. You interrupt it, say, hey, we're talking about this. I just hooked you in, but I want to introduce this before. Another easy one is saying, before we jump in, hear that all the time, or even using the word now. Say, now, before we get into this, I do want to let you know that we all this information we're talking about is actually from our course, which actually goes more in depth into exactly what we're mentioning. That goes into specifically um, like XYZ, but there's even more that you don't even realize that goes into this, like XYZ, that we are not, like ABC, which we're not talking about. When you breadcrumb like that, when you kind of list like, hey, this is the things we're talking about today, but there's bigger things that ties into this that they don't know about. When you widen this gap in their minds specifically, it's breadcrumbing and saying, it's telling them, saying, hey, there's a lot more you don't know. You got to do a lot more research, a lot more searching. And I tell you, when you are a customer like this, when you're a person like this who is like, who kind of like, you have a problem and you're on YouTube. I remember I was actually on Google Analytics. I was learning about Google Analytics more, and I bought a course from someone because I searched into YouTube specifically. I was like, okay, I have this problem. I want to be able to track some of my who's like clicking on my links and such. And so I was like, I want to learn more about this. I have a problem. I want to learn everything I can. So I searched up in YouTube everything you need to know about Google Analytics, or like Google Analytics Masterclass, something along that lines. And I got on this guy's YouTube channel, and I was watching it, and he was kind of doing a quick rundown, and he was like, okay, so this is that. He's like, by the way, I have another video going into that thing. I'm not going to get in fully into it, but this is what you kind of can know about it. And then he scrolls down 2 seconds, and he's like, I got another video on that. And then he keeps on scrolling down, and he's like, this is this, it does that. But if you really want to know, you have to watch this video. It's a whole nother thing you need to learn. I'm like, man, dude, I'm like, how much stuff do I need to learn, right? And so at that point, I realized, I was like, shoot, I might as well just buy his course. Because I already was in that intent of like, I got a serious problem, I want to learn this. So I was fine with spending money. And so for me, honestly, I was kind of searching for a course. But regardless, I kind of reverse engineered. I'm like, why does that work so well? Why did I buy instantly at that point? And like, I went in his thing. I was at Google Analytics beginners, and then he had advanced, and he had all this different stuff. I'm, dude, I might as well just buy the whole thing. I don't care. I'll come back to it. I'll come back to it if I need to. And at least I have a course and someone I go to if I have questions ever with it. So what I did. So this is the whole point here, is that when you list out the things, but then you say, okay, but there's also additional things you need to know about that, which I have another video, or have more stuff that kind of goes in the course. When you widen this gap to say, hey, you think you're here, but let me show you there's a lot more to this journey, and you show them like in a respectful way like this, absolutely go to work completely well. So that's that. You can use a transition like fanboys. You say, before we jump in, now, before we jump in. Or you say, by the way, all this, blah, blah, blah. That'll work incredibly well. Only need 1 to 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes, whatever it may be. Works well. Okay, so after this point, after you get your pitch, now we need to introduce who you are. Now, I went a little bit back and forth. I haven't updated it, haven't put it back into AI to think about switching these of who you are before the pitch. But honestly, I'd rather get the pitch in. I think I'd rather get the pitch in before than who you are. I was just trying to play in my mind, like, okay, if I went into hooking them in and then introducing and then pitching, I mean, honestly, that could work. I think pitching could probably work better after the fact. You can interchange those. I haven't been in it. I just wanted to get this video out. So it's only spend like 2 to 3 minutes. You explain who you are, but you don't want to belabor it. You don't want to kind of just like really drag it out. A lot of people, these people who are watching you, are probably only going to know who you are. But the people, by chance, by the off chance, that don't know who you are just tuning in maybe for the first couple times, if you give them that explanation of who you are, why you're credible, why you are authority in this space, then absolutely going to do wonders, because then it gives them more of a reason to kind of listen to you. This is the same reason why usually after you hook people in your videos, you tell them who you are. I didn't do this video. Probably should have in hindsight, but screw it. We're going forward with it. So spend only 2 to 3 minutes, and then we'll kind of go from that. Then you want to rehook. At this point, you're rehooking. Why are you rehooking at this time? Well, the point of the live stream is that this is a 45-minute video. And so you got to consistently keep them engaged. And it's kind of like TV shows where they constantly kind of have mini hooks, mini conflicts that get solved throughout like a bigger arc. There's always constantly mini hooks of progression. When you look at step-by-step videos, like a top 5 things or top how to maybe make a video in 5 steps. You have an outline, a kind of natural story arc of like step one, do this. After that point, you fulfill that. You've completed step one. That's a mini loop you already finished. Step two, it feels like you're progressing. And so if you give them something to progress, it naturally feels like they're kind of rewarding themselves. They're and having like a mini kind of feedback loop, like, okay, yeah, I'm learning stuff. This is great. And so the point of that is if we kind of hooks them in, it's like, okay, I want to get to number two. And there's a reason why people always say, this is the top 3 things or this is the top 5 things, but you want to stay to the end because the last thing is going to absolutely blow your mind. Everyone hears that, everyone knows. They say shock you, and it's like, okay, it's so exaggerated. Like, it's so exaggerated, but that's the whole point of it. That's the whole idea of it, the psychology behind it. And so the hook of what we're doing is we want to hook them to A. We want to hook them to A. Now, why are we hooking them to A? Shouldn't we just get into A? Well, the reason I say this is because specifically when we're doing kind of more business, financials here, I knew that I wanted my kind of team to really look at the macro first, the macro, what the landscape generally looks like as a general sense before we get into more of the financial stories. So what we did here was, okay, I want to add that in, tack that in. If you're not doing that, you can completely eliminate this. It doesn't matter. You don't need this. So then at that point, you get into just your story. You don't need this rehook. You get into A. The reason I'm rehooking is because we're adding this in between. We're adding this in between A and the who we are. Because I'm still withholding A and not going the topic, I need to rehook to re-engage them. Hopefully that makes sense. So the way you do this is say who you are, and you say, okay, the way you kind of really do this is say, like, if A is like a big news event, you're like, okay, so like this big news story we're going to be looking at, but first I want to get into the macro. First I want to get the macro because it can fuel everything, or it can fuel our discussion and make it more in depth and kind of give you a broader overview, so it can make more sense in what we're going to be talking about why XYZ is so important and what you need to know about it and why it's not what you think it is. You know, you can hook it back in. At this point, you should be able to, you'll see straight away, like, these hooks are very important. But that's what you say. But first, usually, but is a great way to kind of to re-engage someone in a way, to like re-engage, kind of flip on that like curiosity loop. By curiosity loop, it means directly what it means. It just piques someone's curiosity to kind of keep on watching for a longer time. And so you see that a lot. Number A. So A. After we get in the macros, then we get the A, and then we just jump into it. And so the process that I looked at with all of this, with A, was, okay, what is, first, when I looked at these kind of live streamers, they always looked at X. They always looked at like the source first. They always give the source where they got it from. So usually what they did was, for example, Alex Jones. If you know who Alex Jones is, you can do your research, or you can look at like Altcoin Daily, who talks about cryptos. They always like pull up an X report and read the post. Do like breaking news, like they read the post, and that might say breaking news, XYZ has just invested $100 million into this company, and they might read that. And if it's a clip attached to it, then they'll play it and show you pretty much the source where they got it, and then they'll go into their opinion. Then they're paired up with what they're talking about, knowledge, etc. And then after the fact, they go into Q&As. And so what I mean by Q&A is they'll look at the chat and see if there's any comments or any questions in there or anything they want to kind of add to it that they want to pull. And so this adds the engagement that you should have with these live streams. And so that's the point. You bring them in, and there you go. They're talking about main topic A. Okay, now let's rehook them to B. So we just finished the main story, our main kind of arc, or a main kind of promise at the beginning. Great, now they feel satisfied. They just completed the major milestone. Now we feel like we're progressing, we're making great moves. There's a reason why I put A first, is because you get to that, and so it doesn't feel like you're dragging out what you promised at the beginning. Just get straight to the point. People will like you for it. They feel rewarded for it. And so we already put enough barriers in between A Let's reward them for waiting that long. Now we rehook again. Why? Well, we just finished A, and so in that self, some people are like, okay, I got what I wanted. But see what I did there? But what if we added another curiosity loop into it? We say, okay, that's great. That's story A. But what if the next thing actually ties into this and actually has a bigger implication for that because of story A? Or what if there's a whole other side you're not even thinking about? And so you open up another thing that they didn't realize they introduced that makes them want to stay. So really, it's like a longer video. I mean, that's really what it is. And so at this point, when you're rehooking them, the whole point is to get them re-engaged to go through story B, because maybe they don't want to see B, they want to see C, but they have to get through story B and at least keep them engaged in long enough to want to see it. So at this point, we can rehook them for B, but we also can rehook them for the interview here. Let's just say we can do both. We can say, hey, we just finished story A, but if you want to see like our in-depth conversation, which I'm going to have with XYZ expert, then just stay a little bit longer. We're going to be going through story B, story C, which completely ties into this, which everything you need to know, but also we'll jump into questions or answers that this expert has that no one else is talking about. So you can go in that as well. You can do kind of double hooks with it. You can make as many hooks as possible if you want, but just don't kind of belabor it, if that makes sense. So at that point, there is an optional thing here. Let's just say you have a lot of things you want to promote. Let's just say you have a membership you want to promote. Let's just say you also have maybe some store items or e-com items, or you have a Shopify store you want to sell some stuff on, and you have different offers you want to tie in, or affiliates you want to call out or shout out to. This is the opportunity to do it. And I put this optional because you don't want to over kind of promote these people. When it comes up naturally, you can the stuff, but if it makes sense to add an additional thing, maybe that's different from your beginning kind of promotion up here, then you can do another like shout out or promotion kind of tie in here, because you just gave a little bit of value. You give a decent amount of value in the macros and the story A that it's justified to be able to do that. And it's better earlier than later because you'll probably have more people who are at this point. Cool. So we got that cleared. Now we're halfway. We're getting the story B. Same as next thing. You go through the same exact setup. Very simple, very straight to the point. After that, now you rehook. Again, you just say, okay, we've been through story A, we went to story C, B, but C is also equally as important, and it's XYZ, whatever it may be, you know? Weird. Okay, sorry, I'm just looking at that. Okay, cool. So now we did that. Now we're going to rehook them into C, and again, you can hook them back into the interview process as well. So you get through story C, same structure, and then you get into the hook again, but this is a little bit different. This time you are teeing up the guest. What do I mean by teeing up? Well, it's exactly kind of like what I mean like with T-ball. You kind of just, you set it up, you're giving them an easy like credibility boost, authority boost, and really setting them up to make them like, to kind of get people interested in them, but also a set up authority. So really what you're doing is saying, now we got into the very exciting, we're going to have the very exciting guest that we're going to be talking to, XYZ. He has done over $100 million in profit for his thing. It doesn't have to be that. I'm just kind of listing off the top of my head, which is business. He has done XYZ. And so he does XYZ. So he's very knowledgeable in what he does. And you say, like, what would you say to the people who are maybe stuck in this current state, who feel like they tried everything, they tried XYZ, but they feel like they can't do anything, they feel like they keep on hitting their head against the wall? What would you give to them as a piece of advice for the first thing? Or what are the top 3 things you say? You see how I teed up where I give the authority, but also open up the curiosity loops for them to answer with? Absolutely great. And so that's what you want to kind of do that with. So this, you can give around 8 to 12 minutes or so. And the cool thing with this is that it gives them enough time where you can actually have a serious conversation, but also it makes it possible where you don't dwell on something for too long where you run out of questions. Usually you should have your questions lined up for this, but it makes it so it doesn't feel like awkward if it comes to a doll. And that's what we don't want to have. We want to keep the energy high. And so to do that, we kind of make it a smaller window and really have our set questions that we want. And with that, you can also tie in Q&As with this, like looking at your comments or the people who's like you live stream to, and say, hey, like I saw this question, they have a question in this, what would you say to this? That's also great. Now, you might remember that I said back in the beginning, I did a person / Q&A. Now, we'll just say you don't have a person, like an interview lined up for this. What you can do is actually replace this section, replace this kind of with the interviewer, which is Q&A. Completely fine, that works. So there's that, and you might be thinking as well, 8 to 12 minutes is kind of short. What if I want to have a more full interview? You can have a separate live stream for that, or you can make this live stream longer if it's warranted, if you want to try it out. My suggestion that I made to them is we have a membership. We'll go probably put the interview and process actually inside of our membership and saying only giving them 8 to 12 minutes. And then if they want to sign up for the full interview, they can go and sign up for a membership with the company or the client that we're working with. That's my suggestion. I think they actually liked it. It made sense. Now, every once in a while, they can post like the full interview publicly. Completely fine. I think it's actually warranted because it can show like, hey, I have interviews with these people, full interviews. You can see the process that I asked them to show like I'm clearly asking them really high in-depth questions. You can do that. And then at the end of this, you get to the end. And so the end allows you to review what you went over. Then you give a final call to action saying, hey, by the way, again, we're going to actually have more of an in-depth conversation with the interviewer, but also be talking about the stuff XYZ in our community. I'm going to give you everything you need to know about building a foundation for whatever you're selling, whatever it may be. You know your pitch. You do it better than me. And then at that end, and once you do that, you say, and by the way, if you thought the stream was amazing, we actually have another upcoming stream Thursday. We always do it Tuesdays and Thursdays, whatever kind of your course is or your schedule. And you say, and you show them when the next stream is, and you should know what you're doing on that stream so you can kind of tease it and everything. So 2 things I kind of want to make aware with this, bring to attention. 2 things. So let's start with the left one, and then we'll finish with the right one here. The first thing is I mentioned this is not like a slideshow. It's not like a webinar where you have set slides. This is more of an interaction community thing. So when we do that, I like the slides. I like the tab approach, and this is from John Cloud, great guy. And the way he live streams is he has all these tabs set up, ready to go. That means if you wanted to do the same, you have it already set to go, and you can switch between them. You kind of just follow the linear progress. You set it up in the order you go, and just keep on going down the line. Super simple, plus it constantly changes the screen, and it makes it more interactive and feels more flowing than like a presentation just sitting here and just say, and like it's like very mandatory like business. It feels a lot more free flowing in a way, like impromptu, off the cuff, more natural, right? And that's what we want. We want something more natural that can connect with the audience and not something that feels forced. Obviously, that comes with time, repetitions, but we want to maximize our success here. And it starts with looking even at the smaller details that others are implementing that we can implement ourselves. So we have that in mind. Now, what's the other thing? What's the last thing that I want to kind of bring up? The last thing is, I know it's CNBC and it's Kramer. If you know who he is, people people kind of diss on him with his advice. They usually say, do the opposite of what he tells you, which, whatever it may be. But I think one of the great things when I was watching this was that he was just showing the same slide for 20 minutes. Now, people would be like, what, 20 minutes? That seems like a long time for... He wasn't really a live... I think it was live on TV, but I think YouTube, it was just a recording unless they premiered it. But people may think, well, 20 minutes is long. Well, one, Kramer is... I mean, he's physically moving. He's actively, like, engaging and everything. But I think the main thing you don't really realize is that it goes back to presenting and public speaking 101. Public speaking is the idea when you're presenting something, You don't want to have it clashing with what you're saying. And it's not strictly by words where it's like do X and then my slides say don't do X. Like obviously not that. What I mean by this specifically is that he has the things as guideposts or kind of signals for what he's going to talk about, but that's it. It's very simple. It's one thing. It's obviously it's multiple things, but it represents one idea, and you want one idea at a time. That was one of the biggest things that I remember back in college was specifically you want to have one idea, not tons of text either. When you have tons of text, people are going to be reading that and not focusing on you. You do not want that. You want quite the opposite. You want people to look at you and reference the slides. And the same thing for you. Now, that's a rule of thumb. I'm not saying that that's the kind of the law, right? Take everything with a grain of salt here. A point being is you want to have all the expertise in your mind, which you should. If you're the expert on this, what you're presenting, you should be able to talk about it free flowingly with your thoughts. Yes, you gotta have some stuff prepared, like there might be numbers you gotta remember. Completely fine. But that's why this tab approach allows you to kind of be more free flowing compared to trying to stuff everything on a page and or a slides or a couple slides and trying to go through it. And so here he had this slide up for 20 minutes, camera pan back and forth every now and then to a TV on his right side over here with like a chart of like what the stock was doing, which yeah, I mean whatever is cool and everything, but it had movement. But he was more the person. He was the expert that we're paying attention to. He was the brand. He was the guy, the expert, the person we wanted to know his thoughts on. And so he knew everything from the top of his mind, and he done his research. And that's what we want. We want someone to condense the research so we don't have to spend that time doing it ourselves. And so that's the rundown in this. And I think it's very compelling. I think it's a very solid structure. It's something we haven't formally tried out yet. And so I want to kind of make that clear is that this is not something done, but it's based on market research that I have made a hypothesis on that I think is going to be solid, that it uses AI to kind of help guide this process. And it's in the mind of hooking people in and bringing in new people while also retaining them and trying to get as many people as possible doing this. So hopefully this is helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks.